Good evening, Energy Rogue Nation. Welcome back to another weather discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As advertised, tonight we are going to be talking about heating and cooling degree days, specifically for Western and Eastern Europe. And the time scope here is really in the short term, over this next week, week and a half. That's how we do these videos here on the channel. And for those of you who are new to Energy Rogue, welcome. We've had quite a few new subscribers added to the Energy Rogue family, so really enjoy having you guys here, and I'm looking forward to having some conversations and answering your questions about the weather, because as we know, weather plays such a huge role in natural gas and energy trading. It's one of those heavily weighted variables that certainly have implications on the pricing of these commodities. So you are in the right place. And for those of you that are new, I would also recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel. It's going to be within the embedded link that I post in the Weather Rogue Discord. Hop on over, give us a subscribe, and that way you can get notifications on when these videos do go out. And of course, you will also get notifications here in the Weather Rogue Discord channel. I will be dropping those YouTube links every Tuesday and Thursday when we do these forecast discussions. Before we also get into tonight's video, I want to just give an announcement. There's something significant that has happened in the weather community, and I'm about to nerd out here for a second, so bear with me. This model you're looking at, and what we're going to go into tonight, is the ECMWF. This is the European weather model. They just made a significant change. One of the most significant changes in the life cycle of the European model. If you recall, and maybe not, but for those of you that do, the European model had a certain amount of time that it went out to. So it would go usually as far out as, I believe is around like 200 plus hours. Now, for the first time ever, it goes out to 360 hours. Now, I know many of you are probably thinking, Brendan, what's the big deal? I mean, it seems like they should have done this a long time ago. Well, the important thing to note is that these weather models require a lot of computing power. And in this age where computing continues to rapidly accelerate, our ability to handle large sets of data, well, that also has implications for the meteorology community, in that these weather models that were traditionally constricted to a certain time domain are now extending farther out because of these technological advances we're making. It's not just in the world of AI, it's also in the way that we do business in the weather world. And a lot of that is derived from these weather models. So it's a pretty significant thing, because the GFS traditionally has gone out to 360 hours, and now the European model is matching the GFS. It gives us sort of a good distribution between those two models on where they're at that far out in the time scale. So we have the GFS, we have the European model that are now going out both 360 hours, and I'll just show you that here. Actually, technically the GFS goes out to 384, but you get the point. We're talking about a 2-ish week window that the European model has extended out to, almost matching the GFS. Now, Nikitas, you brought up a phenomenal post from Twitter that I want to talk about very briefly as we go over these models. Nikitas had actually showed us, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the Discord name, bear with me here, but you had posted a X post, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pull that up here, of essentially it was a weather model. I believe it was the GFS. Give me a second here, let me go back, and I'll just pull this over here. And then here we go, right? So you showed the 2-meter temperature anomaly for the European ensemble. Now, this is really important because I mentioned in my post earlier this morning that on social media, a lot of times meteorologists and non-meteorologists will take photos like these and create some sort of narrative. Now, I'm certainly not implying that this model or these products, such as the ForecastNet V2 and the European Ensemble, are necessarily inaccurate, but what I am saying is there are limitations to anything that we show. So, for example, heading on back here to this product, the European model, one of the things that's important to distinct and differentiate between, say, a singular model and an ensemble like the European ensemble, the EPS. The EPS, it's very good at giving us a confidence interval. So what I mean by that is these ensembles, think of them as 20 to 30 different members or different interpretations of the weather that are essentially averaged out, and you get a mean of the wind, you get a mean of the temperature, right? That's great because it gives us confidence, and actually greater confidence, or lack thereof, of larger scale weather patterns. But here's the drawback. The ensembles, whether it be the EPS or the GEFS that were shown in some of those products that Nikitas had shown, it also masks extremes. You may think that that's a good thing, but when we're talking about a major Arctic blast that's going to impact, say, Western Europe, which we're going to show some of that here in a moment, you're not going to see these same temperature anomalies on an ensemble because, as we just mentioned, we're taking an average. And for my statistics folks out there, when you take the average of a spread or a distribution, you tend to smooth out some of those, greater extremes. Maybe not all the way to the right or all the way to the left, but you smooth things out, and it tends to water down what is likely to be more in touch with reality. Subsequently, with those models like the European and the GFS, these singular solutions, well, the pro with them is the opposite of the ensembles, which is, essentially, I'll call it better representation. Simply put, because it's one singular solution, it takes into account more of those temperature swings. And it tends to perform better with temperature output. Not all the time, but those singular solutions help to really narrow down some of those key temperature forecasts. And that's especially true when we start to talk about things like convective allowing models, such as the NAM and the HRRR, these models that only go out about 3 days. Those actually hone in temperatures even better than the Euro. But for the sake of the distinction between these two, the ECMWF is a better representation of your temperatures, but the con is that it can be too extreme at times, right? If you only have one solution and one interpretation, well, what if that's the outlier? That might actually be a poor representation of those temperature swings, or in this case, heating and cooling degree days. So with that, you're probably wondering, Brendan, what's the silver lining here? I mean, how do I know what to pick? Well, that's where I come in, okay? Spent a lot of time. It's important because when you go into school for meteorology, and I'm a recent graduate with my undergrad, you find that there really is no such thing as a silver bullet in meteorology. I could sit here and post images like this of the ECMWF and paint a picture for you and create a storyline, but ultimately, that's not serving anybody any good. Because these models are meant to give a spread. The more you look at the models, the more you truly get a grasp and an understanding of those biases that are baked in, is when you can truly put things together. Think of these weather models as puzzle pieces to the bigger puzzle. You're going to put them together, and some of them may not fit in certain spots, but ultimately, when you put that puzzle together, it gives you a much clearer picture of the room. And that's exactly what we do here. So in these videos, when I look at the European model, or I only look at one solution, it's not necessarily meant to lead you down the wrong path, but rather to just give you a singular representation of a broader pattern change. When I do these videos, I want you guys to see these changes that take place on a large scale, because ultimately that has impacts downstream on things like heating and cooling degree days. And we're going to see that right now here with Europe. What a wonderful transition into this next topic. So tonight's video, of course, is focused on Western and Eastern Europe. And as we always do, we are starting first with the ECMWF, the European model tonight for my European friends. The 500 millibar, which is our jet stream. And anytime you see these bright orange and pink colors, that's corresponding to strong areas of high pressure. Now, if you watched yesterday's video, you saw that these areas of high pressure that build, especially in certain spots in these northerly latitudes, help to actually bring down some of that cold air as far south as Western Europe, places like Portugal, Spain, all the way towards the United Kingdom, and even portions eastern into Germany and Italy. This is the catalyst behind bringing cold air down. And so as we go forward, this is Tuesday, so we're heading, actually yesterday, we're going to take this forward over the next couple of days, and you see that high pressure building across Western Europe. That's actually showing us warm temperatures. Remember, high pressure corresponds to warmer temperatures and some of those more milder conditions for this time of year. So we're certainly not talking about cold temperatures or below normal temperatures for Western Europe here as we kick off into the weekend. But you're going to see that quickly change once we get into Saturday, Sunday, and really into early next week. I'd even shoot for about Monday to Tuesday. And here's exactly what happens. That high pressure that we have in Western Europe begins to decay over the weekend. We start to lose some of those warmer temperatures. And because of that, as a result of that Greenland block that sets up here as we get into early next week, that's actually going to displace cold not only across the lower 48, but also for Western and Eastern Europe. More on that in a moment. I'm going to show you some temperature anomalies that are going to blow your mind. But one thing I want to mention is that you're going to also find during this run here on the European model that I was incorrect. If you've been following me from last week's European weather update, I was wrong. I said that for the most part, it looked to me like we were going to see some pretty warm conditions above normal for a lot of Europe as we head into the rest of November and into December, and still ultimately a mild winter for Europe as a whole. But I gotta say, my short-term forecast is likely not going to verify because of that pesky Greenland block that is continuing to grow in confidence as we expect that to set up early next week. That is going to bring down some of that cold air, displace those low pressures near the poles as far south as Western and Eastern Europe, especially as we get to that Monday and Tuesday time frame. But you notice that as we head towards even late next weekend, we do see a bit of a reprieve before the potential for another lobe of cold air to move in by the time we get to Thursday, not of next week, but the week after. We're talking about American Thanksgiving time frame is when we could be seeing some of that cold air move in. But overall, my long-term forecast remains pretty much intact. I am not changing that, and it's not because I'm stubborn. It's just because I truly think, and I truly believe based on the analogs, based on the models that we're seeing, that we will continue overall to forecast out for a milder winter across Western and Eastern Europe. I really don't think that La Nina is going to have such a profound impact as, say, in the United States. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for some oscillating and some moderating of temperatures between December into February. So that's my prediction, but of course, you guys know I'm in the business of being paid to be wrong. I don't like being wrong, but my forecast still stands for Europe. And by the way, quick shout out to the United States. My forecast still remains for the United States as well, especially the northern half of the United States for some of those below normal temperatures, with much of the southern United States remaining above normal throughout most of the season. Of course, this video is not about you guys, United States, so I'm just giving you a quick little shout out, but that is something that I wanted to note. So a little bit of a tale of two countries. We have the United States that is likely to deal with some of these waves of cold air, especially as we round out November and begin December. Something that I predicted, by the way, and I'm happy to kind of pat myself on the shoulder for. Granted, what I was wrong about the United States was how early we're expecting this cold air to move in. We're talking before Thanksgiving here in the United States. We're going to see some of those well below normal temperatures for much of the central U.S. That's certainly, I was off by about a week or two on that. But we are certainly still very bullish on a strong winter for the northern half of the U.S. And as you kind of see with Europe here in the immediate short term, not very bullish on your winter. I overall think it's going to be relatively mild for most of the season for a lot of folks, especially Western Europe. I said Eastern, a little bit more on the oscillating side for Eastern Europe, especially as we get towards places like Poland and even as far east as Ukraine. Could see some of those cooler temperatures, but otherwise, Western Europe is likely going to be, I have the most confidence in some of those milder temperatures out in Western Europe. Let's take a closer look at that, and we will dive a little bit deeper and look at some of those temperature anomalies. So we're going to go over to thermodynamics, 2-meter temperature anomaly, and this really underscores some of those colder temperatures. So recall that this blue is below normal, and then the oranges and yellows are above normal. So you see we get a lot of this cold air to set up across Central and Western Europe, and meanwhile the UK is remaining above normal, Spain as well. We really don't see that cold air come in until what would be that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday time frame. That's an association with that little lobe of low pressure from the poles that gets displaced, and look at that wave of cold air. We're talking about the entire stretch of Europe, with the exceptions of the Mediterranean, that are going to be seeing some of those well below normal temperatures. Even up towards Finland and Sweden, we could be talking about temperatures near 8 to 12 degrees Celsius below normal. So that's a pretty seismic shift when we talk about it in terms of those Celsius, right? My American friends, we always love our Fahrenheit, but I gotta say, as a meteorologist, we got drilled in our head how to use Celsius and how to use the metric system, and I love it. if the United States could adopt Celsius, it would be so much easier, but that's another diatribe for another day. Point is, as we get into much of the early to middle of next week, and really the middle to late next week, we're expecting to see much of Europe really battle some of those below normal temperatures. I mean, hell, look at this. This even extends into much of not just next week, but the week after. Could be seeing some of those colder temperatures get as far south as Italy, as well as even some portions of Turkey could see some below normal temperatures. We're even, once again, talking about 8 to 15 degrees below normal for this time of year. So definitely some winter air moving through early on to round out November. But back behind that, we do get an upper level ridge that sets up, and that's going to return some of those well above normal temperatures likely to the UK. And of course, as we talked about, these temperatures are, of course, going to change over time. But remember, I show you this model simply to give you a gauge on the general pattern trends in order for you to make some sound decisions, for you to truly be informed and aware of where we're going, especially as we round out November and head into December. So that is it as far as that discussion. I want to just show you one last product, give you a quick update on these climate models. This, of course, here is the CFS, and still showing above normal temperatures for much of December, especially into January and February. I will remind you that the CFS tends to have a warm bias, so I also like to look at the CAN-SIPs to get a better idea. And this, to me, makes a lot more sense. Much of Eastern Europe being below normal for December, that makes a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things, and that's something that, of course, I've been forecasting. And meanwhile, for much of Western Europe, a little bit more on the mild side. You see, as we head into January, still well below normal for places east of the Mediterranean, and you see some below normal temperatures out that way as well, especially as we get out towards Russia, parts of Western Russia, and then Ukraine. And February, that below normal temperature regime continues, but for much of Western Europe remaining well above normal. Now, I have seen some discussion about how these climate models may not be accounting for La Nina. In other words, they may not be pricing it in as much because it hasn't truly developed yet in full. I think that's a fair assessment. However, I am still sticking to this forecast because I have not seen any budging. And also, with what we've observed up to this point, it's a lot more of this oscillating temperature regime as you've seen. But overall, my long-range forecast for December, January, and February has not changed for Western Europe. The only thing that I might be changing in this statement is Eastern Europe. I'm a little bit more bullish on those below normal temperatures than I was before, and that's the only adjustment I'm making. But otherwise, for some of those higher populated areas of Western Europe and those higher populated countries, my forecast has not changed. So, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you really did enjoy this video. Be sure to like and comment on the YouTube channel, and also be sure to comment down below in the Weather Road Discord if you have any questions. And as I told you this past week, I will be posting some poll questions in the Discord channel to gauge your interest and get some feedback on some of the products that we have in the pipeline. For example, wxrogue.com, we are continuing to develop this website, and I am actively working on a European model interpretation. Right now we have the GFS and the NAM. I am actively working on the European models. Matter of fact, it's done. The only issue is just some of the coding side, getting this actually up and running on the website. That's the only little barrier, But other than that, this product is complete. And I am looking forward to adding additional content to this website. It's not going to remain free for long, folks, so take full advantage of it before some of this gets put behind a paywall. So other than that, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next weather discussion. Take care. Have a great weekend.